Welcome to Releasing Your Inner Dragon, where story creators talk story creation. Drake is an award-winning fantasy novelist and creative writing teacher. You can find his epic fantasy series, The Genesis Oblivion, on Kindle Vella. Marie runs a fantasy world-building channel called Just in Time Worlds, and her first book, The Hidden Blade, is available on Kindle Unlimited. We hope you enjoy this episode. Hello and welcome to Releasing Your Inner Dragon with Marie and Drake. And today we're going to be discussing how to end a story. Now, there have been some shocking examples of ending a story. And I want to call back to our last episode where we spoke about framing devices and talk about the utter disappointment that was How I Met Your Mother's ending.
And again, I give them a lot of leeway with this. This was hard. If you've seen the ending of How I Met Your Mother, it's terrible. It literally is. And it's a show that's 20 years old, so I'm just going to spoil it. And you can tell what they did. Or at least, and again, these are all my opinions. I don't know any of the writers. I wasn't in on the cast. I have no insider information on this. This is just a writer watching it and extrapolating, with my knowledge of how things work and what probably happened. But in the pilot episode, they introduced Robin, the Robin character, as the love interest to Ted. There's some weird things that go on with television. You walk this really weird balance of, we want to tell a story that's satisfying to the audience, but we also want to hook them so that they want to watch the next season. But we also got to be very careful because we could get canceled. Like literally, we may not even know if we're ever even going to finish this. And we all know the dozens, if not hundreds, if not thousands of stories.
Firefly.
There was one that's
Firefly is always too soon.
Well, so Firefly didn't get canceled for that reason. Firefly got canceled because especially at the time, the executives of Fox didn't know their rear ends from a hole in the ground.
Yeah,
they were clueless on the genre, on sci-fi, on all this stuff, and they botched that. It had nothing to do with anything else.
Yeah.
They put it on an odd night. They changed the night. They put it out of order. The first episode that aired on TV was the train episode, which makes no sense if it's the first episode you watch. Like, it's just everything was wrong. And none of that was Joss Whedon's fault. None of that was the production fault.
I know, but Firefly never got like Firefly. When I think about things that were canceled, that's the one that I cry about.
That's the one that hurts the worst. Because you watch those 13 episodes and you're like, oh my God, how fun would it have been to play in this world for the next 5, 8, 10 years? Like,
I want
absolutely
more.
Yeah,
and then you can't have it.
It's still, in my opinion, the crowning achievement of Whedon, and he's done quite a few little amazing things.
Yeah,
but that, I think, was his crowning achievement. I don't know if he'll ever do better than that. Yeah. But no, so when we take a look at How I Met Your Mother, so we introduce Robin as our love interest in the beginning, and it's very obvious that's your mom, kids. That's her. But we want to drag this out. Sort of like you had mentioned Castle in the last episode too. One of the worst things about Castle, and this is the death knell or whatever you say it, for most shows where the central plot device is a will they, won't they. When you have a will they, won't they plot device, as soon as they will, the show's over. The show doesn't survive that. And Castle's a great example of that. They get together and the show just didn't survive. The only one that I know of that actually did it and did it well was Bones. They finally get together. And it just keeps on going, and it kept on going well. I don't know why that was able to make that transition, but it is a hard thing. So you have a television show where the entire premise is will they, won't they? They do, because I'm talking to the grown kids. Like, we did, and you're the proof of we did. Like I always say, I can always prove to the world that I've had sex at least twice. Guaranteed I've had sex at least twice, because I have 2 kids, and there's really no other way to do it. That's a tough thing when you're like, oh wow, we made it through season 1 and we're pretty highly rated. Like, we're getting really good reviews. We just got, I think they actually got 2 more seasons after the first season. I think they bought 2 and 3. So now they're like, oh, we got 3 seasons now. And so you can't keep developing that Ted Robin relationship because you would run out of story. So now they start bouncing around. And so what I think happened is the writers were like, oh my God, how awesome would it be if Robin isn't their mom? Like through this whole thing, she's been always on that fringes. They've never actually had that relationship. Matter of fact, if I remember correctly, Barney and Robin have a relationship, but Ted and Robin never do. If I remember, it's been 10 years since
It's been a long time since I've watched that show. Yeah.
But I think that's a brilliant thing. And then they introduced that the person that they were like, they met each other at that train station, and it was just this beautiful, because they knew that the season was ending. And I think they ran with that. And I think that was absolutely going to be their mom. And then I just feel like the executives, and again, I have a lot of problems with executives, but I think the executives came in and went, oh no, I don't like that. He has to get with Robin. And so they were like, oh yeah, so in this episode, we're madly in love with this girl and we're literally getting married. And in the next episode, she's dying of cancer. And now I'm with Robin. Like, and that's literally how it ends. It ends with, you had this entire season of this beautiful romance, this amazing romance that ended in marriage. Like, it's this beautiful, and then and literally we cut from wedding to deathbed, dying of cancer, you're dead, you're out of the picture. Like, there's nothing, and that's why I said I don't think they had the kids between marriage and death. But and then Robin is just there to save the day, and they
that's
end with
horrifying. That is a horrifying ending.
Terrible. And the reason why I think that it is an executive thing is because I just can't imagine a writer writing that beautiful of a romance for a season and then going, yeah, I'm going to throw all this away and just end it this way. I have to imagine it's the money man going, oh no, you will do what I say.
Yeah. Because
I'm your boss.
Yeah.
And so then you just have to bend and go with that. Horrible ending. Horrible. And it would have been a great ending if you had, because you had this season of a beautiful romance. It really was. It was I think that last season up until the last episode was the best season of the show. You finally meet the mom, or who you think is the mom. You finally get the romance that Ted's been pining over. He's wanted this perfect relationship, this thing that we all want. I mean, that's the thing. Stories are about fantasy fulfillment. So you follow these characters and you're hoping that they get it, because that's how you fulfill your fantasy, is that they fulfill their fantasy. And so it was this beautiful, beautiful ending. And then just cut to her dead. Like, it's so terrible. And then, he just is like, well, I guess I'll just bone Robin then. And that'll be my romance. So she's almost like this second place winning, as opposed to the prize that she was in the pilot. In the pilot episode, she was introduced as the prize. Yeah. And in the end of it, she's more like this, well, I mean, I at least got the home version of the game when I left the game show. They didn't win any money, but they gave me a copy of the home version of the game so I can play that with my family. Like, that's what she ended up being, just the consolation prize, as opposed to, this
the
beautiful
actual
romance.
prize. Yeah.
Right. Flip over, because we also talked about Friends. I think they did a great job with the ending of Friends.
Yes.
The thing that everyone has a problem with is it's an open-ended ending.
Yes.
But it's not for the chapter that they were in. So if we look at the story, it's 10 seasons. If we look at the story of these early 20-somethings moving out of the house, finishing college for the first time and getting their own places and having to deal with life, where we end is, Chandler and Monica are married. They just had twin babies. They've got to move to to a suburbs. They can't live in this apartment in the city. Ross is going overseas to this dream paleontology job. Joey's got he's moving to Hollywood. He's going to be an actor. Like, that chapter, they're still going to be lifelong friends, but that chapter
is done.
Is over. Like, we get this good feeling. It's a good ending. And it's still open ending because they have a bunch more adventures to go.
Of course, but
it's not this story.
Yeah. And the thing is, what I always say to people is, you got to remember, when you're telling a story, there has to be conflict. Even a sitcom has conflict.
Yeah.
Right? Which means that
have to have conflict.
Yeah. Which means that those characters go from being happy and fulfilled and going on the adventure of their lives to having massive fundamental issues that have to be overcome as part of being in a story.
And when you do 24 stories a year for 10 years,
That's a lot of story.
It's a lot of ups and downs. It's a lot of, especially considering you have a relationship between 3 guys and 3 girls. And like, how many times are they going to switch partners? Like, it really kind of became a weird.
It really did.
Like, I would have turned it off if Ross and Monica had gotten together, because that's, the whole incest. That's Game of Thrones at that point.
Yeah. But the open-ended nature of the ending didn't in any way, for me, detract from the ending. Like,
no.
Because I can imagine them quite happily living the rest of their lives, lifelong friends, but the chapter.
Still getting together on Christmas.
We were talking about Game of Thrones.
Yeah. Dun, dun, dun.
I will give them this. They did tie up most of the threads. They tied them up like crap, and they forgot half of them because they just didn't care.
I don't think it's that they didn't care. I think it was an impossible task.
Okay.
And this is the problem that I've always had with George Martin. He's never finished anything he's ever started. And, I get that I've got a series hanging out there too, but the publisher went out of business. You got to give me a little credit. And plus I had a massive health issue that took me out of the game for almost 5 years. The problem with George Martin is he always writes. So in epic fantasy, if you're going to do a multi-novel thing, what you do is you start writing out and you add and make the story bigger and bigger. But at some point you have to curve and you have to start coming in and slicing threads and closing things. And, just Wheel of Time is 15 novels, and yet they still succeeded. And yes, Jordan died, but he had tons of us, and he wrote most of the last book, even though Brandon, got the credit for the co-writer, and Brandon wrote plenty of the last book too. But before Jordan died, he really did his damnedest to finish as much of that last book as he could. And then he just made notes for the 2 books that would lead up to it, because he really did have a good grasp where he was going with the story and everything like that. And so you still have this circular, this diamond shape. Martin only writes out. He just never resolves anything. He did it in wild card series. He's done it in everything. He just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger. You have now a TV show that followed the first 5 books, going bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And then you asked a bunch of TV writers, which are not novelists. It's a different breed. It's a different way of thinking about storytelling. It's a different skill set. They're not the same. I'm sorry. They aren't. The novelist is harder. Like in scripts, you're responsible for this. In novelists, you're responsible for this. You're responsible for it all. You're an island. You're a man alone or a woman alone, creating everything. You don't have a director and a cinematographer and a lighting guy and a dressmaker and a prop master and other actors to bring in their own opinion. You don't have any of that. You have you. That's the problem, is now you have these TV writers, which don't have the same skill set as an epic fantasy writer, that are now tasked with taking a story that's already gone off the rails. It's already so massive that I don't think you can bring it back at that point. I've said this before, I don't think it's ever going to get finished in novel form. I don't think it ever is.
I don't think it will either. I think Martin's run out of time. He's 70 now?
Yeah.
I
don't think it can be.
I don't think
it can be done. So you got to give a little bit of leeway to these writers, because you ask them to do something that I don't think is possible to do. That being said, they made some of the worst decisions possible to end the story. That's all on them. That's 100% their fault. Sure, I'm just trying to mitigate the whole. They forgot some of the plot.
They threw away.
Oh my God.
6 seasons of Jamie's character growth.
Yep.
For him to go bone his sister again. 6. You know how fundamentally that thing could have changed if Jamie had killed Cersei, right? Showing his character growth. So he kills another bad monarch. And if Dany, instead of going ballistic, had said, you know what, these people are never going to accept me because I am the foreign invader. But in Essos, I have a responsibility to those people that I conquered there. So I'm going to leave this throne to Jon, who is my nephew that I've been boning in the Grand Targaryen tradition. And I'm going to go and take the throne of Essos. You could have wrapped the whole thing up. I had to cut a swear word there. Sorry, guys. So you could have wrapped it all up there without needing to resort to this. I
can't say that they did much right with their decision making, but I just wanted to say they did have an impossible task. So they're going to miss plot arcs. They're going to miss threads. There's so many that you don't have time. Yeah. They knew that they were coming to an end. They knew that they weren't going to get a 10th season, 12th season, stuff like that. It's one of the things that
but they were offered those seasons, hey? HBO said you can take another 2 seasons to finish it.
I didn't know that.
HBO said they insisted that these become six season episodes. HBO executives have come out and said, we offered these guys 3 full seasons on this, because HBO was making money hand over fist. They were like, no, spin it out by all means, keep going. Like, we don't care. You know?
Interesting. I've lost interest. Like the first 3 books I think are breathtaking. I really do love the first 3 books of the Game of Thrones.
Yeah.
The 4th book was not great.
But
I've lost, and I only know the ending of the TV series because of Wikipedia and friends, and I've never watched it.
Don't watch it. Don't
no, I've lost. Why would I? I'm the type of person, I've never understood this about human beings. This is the weirdest thing to me about human beings. They will go, oh my God, that tastes horrible. Taste this. And I'm like, no, why? Or they'll smell the way, oh my God, that reeks, smell this. And I'm like, why? Why would I do that? Look at the face that you're making.
When people say to me, this is terrible, you shouldn't watch this, I go, okay, and I don't watch it. Like,
so what do they say? A smart man learns from his own mistakes. A wise man learns from other people's mistakes. Yeah. I know the story. I know how it ends. I know everything, all the different things. I've read, I got a lot of enjoyment out of those first 3 books. Well worth my purchase price.
I really enjoyed his very latest book, which is his first book in a new setting, in a new world. And it's John Gwain, and I highly recommend his first new book in his new series. But then I went back and read his older stuff, and I'm starting to be of the opinion that one should just not do that. Like, if you find an author in like their 3rd trilogy, don't necessarily go back and read the previous stuff. It might just be very disappointing. So I went back and I read his previous trilogy, and I've put the 3rd book down, and I don't think I'm going to finish it. So I read 2.5 books in a trilogy, and I'm not going to finish it. The first 2 books, neither of them ended. They didn't tell complete stories. They ended in media res. They ended in the middle of combat. And the next book picks up in the middle of combat. And at that point, you have not told me a story, because you have not brought it to any kind of conclusion. And I understand how a trilogy works. You need to hook through to the next story. But this book that I am reading, this book still needs to tell me a story. And taking this back to Game of Thrones, the first book told the story all the way up to Ned's death. The second book told a story. The 3rd book told the story all the way up to the Red Wedding. There was a narrative story that was in the book. And this is where I feel that trilogy failed. And then when I hit the 3rd book, every single chapter ends with a combat cliffhanger. And I'm like, and I don't mean a hook through. I don't mean I'm interested to find out what's happening. I mean a cliffhanger of does the character survive? And I'm like, I'm done. I have cliffhanger fatigue, and I'm done.
Scenes, chapters, novels, sagas are very similar in structure. So, when I'm talking about the structure of a scene, when I'm talking about the structure of a chapter, and sometimes, one chapter can be one scene, or you can have multiple scenes in a chapter, but a scene, a chapter, a book, a saga, all have to be individually consumable chunks. So in a scene is not a scene if it doesn't have a setup, a defined conflict, a rise in tension, a resolution. Doesn't have to be a resolution of the conflict that was introduced. You have to introduce a conflict. So like I could introduce a conflict. Me and my mom are arguing. We're in a big fight. So that's the conflict I introduced at the beginning of the scene. But then ninjas break into my house And so the resolution is us escaping the ninjas or whatever. So I introduced a conflict that gets overshadowed by a much bigger conflict that is a surprise conflict later. Perfectly fine. Everyone's happy with that, because you're going to resolve the argument usually in just 2 lines of dialogue. Oh my God, I can't believe we're fighting over something so stupid when there's ninjas trying to kill us. Yeah, I'm so sorry. Like, and then that conflict, it's over. It's not, that is not a satisfying overcome.
Yeah.
but it is a satisfying overcome because we have this bigger conflict that we're going to resolve. So you have to have a resolution. It has to be resolved. So the ninjas attacked. It doesn't mean you have to kill the ninjas, but we have to escape the ninjas. We have to get captured by the ninjas. We have to whatever. We have to fight them and beat them, kill them, whatever. You have to resolve it. And then the fifth part of that is you have to have a hook. So the hook is what makes me want to read the next chapter. It's not cutting the resolution in half and making me go to the next chapter.
Yeah. So when the ninjas attack, as an example, building on this example, you could throw hot water in their faces and run out the back door. Yep. Right. So now you've resolved, like, you're getting away from them.
That scene is over. Or you run outside and the entire sky is on fire.
Or that.
Because now you're like, oh, what's this?
Why is this sky on fire?
That's not a cliffhanger.
Yeah.
I'm not in mortal peril. So what you're describing is something I also hate, where we do half the resolution to where we don't know which way it's going to go. We end the scene there, and the next scene starts with the resolution of the last scene. Yeah. That's not a scene.
Yeah,
it's not a good way to tell a story, because you're exactly right. You'll get that cliffhanger fatigue.
I literally have cliffhanger fatigue at this point. I'm like, I cannot take one more chapter ending on a cliffhanger. I don't care anymore. Can they all just die already?
Yeah, I mean, and it's tough. It's tough to distinguish between the getting over that resolution and then also finding a hook that's going to make them read that next chapter. But it's vital. I don't leave without a hook. Normally, these are things you have to use on purpose, by design, for a reason, and then you have to have the payoff.
Yeah, and spread them out.
Movies and novels are actually
incredibly
similar when it comes to structure and story. We definitely have stories that end beautifully. The Princess Bride, we resolve the conflict, we overcome all the obstacles, we tie up every leads. Fezzik is like, I was in the stable and I found 4 horses and I thought, there are 4 of us if we find the pretty lady. Hello, pretty lady. Like, it's just, and then you have the magical kiss, and it even resolves, not only does it resolve the story, but we also go into the bedroom with grandpa and son, and we resolve that in this tear-jerking, amazing, not only do we have the growth of the grandson. You want to talk about framing device. We didn't talk about that. We should have brought a Princess Bride.
We should have.
You have this framing device of a grandfather telling the grandson a story because he's sick. And so at the beginning, he's like, but I want to just play video games. The stories are boring. And then he's like, is this a kissing book? I don't want to read kissing books. And then at the end, he starts to, we're in the movie and they start to do the kiss. And then we jump to the bedroom. Oh, never mind. I won't read. He's like, what? He's like, it's just kissing. We don't need to read that. And he's like, maybe I don't mind kissing so much. Like, he's grown as a character laying in bed. Like, oh my goodness. Gorgeous. And then not only do we go back and finish the kiss, but remember, we come back to the room and he's like, well, he does the old man patting for his keys all over his body. And he's like, Grandpa, maybe you could come back tomorrow and read me the story again. And then the perfect, beautiful callback. Yeah. As you wish.
Yeah. It was
beautiful. We already know, we already know that means I love you. And so, like, oh my God.
Gorgeous.
Like, oh my God. Oh my God.
It's framing device. It's perfect. That movie is perfection.
Everything in that ending is breathtaking. Let's jump forward to the first Wonder Woman movie. So I already have, I will start with, I hate DC. DC, it just cannot tell a story. And I'm talking about their movies. I'm talking about their movies. They cannot make a movie. And it's funny. There's an actual legitimate reason why they keep screwing up. And I don't understand why they keep beating this dead horse, and why Marvel movies, for the most part, there's a few Marvel movies, like the first Hulk in the MCU with Ed Norton. I don't even understand how they made that movie. Oh my goodness. It's
so bad.
It's worse than most DC movies, which is saying something.
Yeah.
But here's the reason why DC sucks and Marvel is great. And it's a very simple reason. And it's where I always go when I'm teaching. In my teaching, I always say it's always about the reader. It's always about the reader. It's always about the reader. It's not about you. You're just the writer. It's always about the reader. And I don't care what you think is good. It's what the reader thinks is good. That's all that matters. It's the reader. Marvel always focuses on the humanity of the character.
Yeah.
Spider-Man is not a story about a kid who's bit by a radioactive spider and gets super strength and super speed and can stick to walls. That's not what the story's about at all. The story is about a teenager who is struggling to find his place in the world. Yes, he has super strength and super speed and spidey senses and can stick to walls. That's all ancillary. It's always about his humanity. For whatever reason, and I have no idea, but in the movies of DC, they only focus on the power. It's the reason why Batman is the only DC movies that do a decent job, because he has no powers.
And it's why the end of Wonder Woman sucked.
Well, but I want to take a step back.
Yeah.
So I try to go into projects blind. I don't watch reviews on them. I don't watch trailers. I live in a world that's pretty closed off. I don't get news or commercials or anything because I watch everything live streaming, everything streaming. I just consume, I play video games, I read comic books. I literally live in a fantasy world and I rarely leave the house. I'm just like, when the shutdown happened, I didn't even notice. Like, I've been shut down for almost 20 years. And I'm like, oh, you guys aren't leaving the house? Oh, that's just like me. Like, I have no idea. Like, there's a pandemic? What? 6 months ago? What? Like, I don't know. I'm in my own little fantasy worlds. So I try to go in things. So I go into Wonder Woman, no expectations. Everything DC does sucks, has always sucked. It just continues to suck. And I am blown away. Like, Act 1,
first 2/3,
amazing.
Wonderful.
Act 2, amazing.
Wonderful.
That mid Act 2 climax, the
that scene where she steps out of the trenches and she's moving again. Oh my! And then
she can beat the soldiers. Yeah, that's not the point. The point is the humanity of her. She inspires them to stand up. Like, that's what that scene is about. It's not about her. It's not about her blocking machine gun bullets with her wrists. Like,
no, it's about
we know all that is there.
Yeah,
it's about, I am going to show you what it means to help defenseless people. There are on the other side of those soldiers, people are suffering, and we're going to stop that. You're going to stop that, and I'm going to show you how to do it. It's the humanity of it. And so for the first 2 acts, so you're right, 2/3 of that movie is breathtaking. Beautiful. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm literally at that point going, DC has finally made a great movie. And then they went, no, Drake, no, we didn't. This was all just a ruse to get you excited. We're actually going to totally screw this completely up. And they did. They were like, the whole 3rd act is, oh, look, we made Diana God. Look, she's a god. She has god powers. Isn't that amazing that she's a god? Look at her god powers. Oh, she's fighting another god. That god has god powers too. Look at them fighting with their god powers. God powers, god powers, god powers. Isn't the god powers amazing? Oh my God, the movie's over. Wasn't that amazing with those god powers? And you're like, no.
No, it wasn't. My biggest complaint with Wonder Woman 1 is that god powers thing. But it's also the fact that I thought, like, somewhere in the movie, they were like, men don't need like an evil god to do evil acts, right? Being men is enough. Like, and I thought for a moment, that they were going to drive a message of sometimes all you can do is the little things to help the people around you, but men are men and they get involved in these huge, and by that, I don't mean the male race. I mean the human.
Right. Yeah, the human. I knew what you were talking about. But I'm glad, because I was about to.
Yeah, no, I don't mean men. I mean
humans.
Humans.
Right.
So humans can drive themselves into these huge conflicts without any assistance from evil, from these evil overlords. And I thought that was the theme of the movie that they were going to drive.
And then they ended it with, no, they're being driven by a big evil guy. But I mean, that's the thing. Like, just look at that thematic element. Men do not need an evil god to do evil things.
Yeah.
Oh, but the reason why they're doing evil things in this movie is because of an evil god.
Yeah.
Like, what?
So as endings go, that one was, despite the fact that it ended the story, it was still a terrible ending.
And I think the reason, because most of the DC movies end terribly.
Yeah.
But it's a terrible movie. So who cares?
Yeah.
That was a great movie. Like, literally, if they had done an ending that was on par with the rest of the movie, it would have been ranked in my mind as equal to any of the best Marvel movies that they've come out with. I would have ranked it right there on par, but because they totally botched the ending and none of it mattered. And then the second one, WW84.
Oh no.
That is your traditional DC movie, in my opinion.
Yeah.
With a twist. It's even worse than the traditional, because not only was it like, they're like, oh, look, Wonder Woman is saving children. Well, of course she is. She's a freaking god. She doesn't struggle to do any of this. She doesn't work for any of this. She just does it. She just beats up, human trafficker. Of course she does. She's a god. She doesn't work for it. She just beats the crap out of them. Everything she does, she doesn't work for at all. But the twist to WW84, she didn't need to be in the movie.
No.
She doesn't do anything. She doesn't do the overcome. The overcome is done by the villain seeing his child and going, oh, wow, I'm probably doing really crappy things because I'm hurting my own child. I'm going to stop. And he stops. She does nothing. She does not need to be in the movie. How insane is that, to have a movie that is titled after a character, like having a Conan movie where Conan just stays in the bar and drinks the whole movie and somebody else kills the demon. Actually, in that case, the demon, so it's having a Conan movie where Conan stays in the bar and drinks the whole time. The demon goes on a rampage and completely runs amok. And then at the end, the demon goes, maybe this is bad. I'm going to be a good demon from here on out. And the movie ends.
To hell.
No, he actually pops wings and goes to heaven because he's awesome. Like, that's literally how WW84 was. And it's like, you people are horrible at this. You should not get paid to do this.
You should not get paid for this.
It was so god awful.
So
and if you liked it, I always say this, remember, when I'm bitching about something, if you like WW84, then that's awesome. It's what it was made for. It's subjective. We have our opinions. They are just opinions. I am happy that you love WW84. It was not for us.
It was definitely not for us. Definitely. It still ended. Like, it was a bad ending. It was an ending that was not in keeping with the rest of the movie. In the case of Wonder Woman 1. I don't even want to think about WW84. It was, I cannot. Wonder Woman 1 is a bad ending, but it is an ending.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'll let you finish, and then
it wraps up threads and it completes the story arc. It completes the story arc in a way that is not in keeping with what went before. The same as the Game of Thrones ending. It completes the story arc in a way that is not in keeping with what went before. And therefore it feels like you are cheating me, the reader, because you have built me up and you've been telling me the story and setting these expectations and putting in place signposts. And then you do a hard left and you say, actually, all that stuff, forget it. Yeah. It's like when Luke Skywalker throws away that lightsaber in that freaking movie made by that guy that I never want to see a movie again by, because he's like, oh, I'm going to subvert your expectations. You can subvert my expectations elsewhere, ever again. Because
when the actor himself is going on tour to badmouth the movie that he's in, playing a character that he's been playing for 40 years, and he goes on tour specifically to badmouth it.
I can't remember who this crazy person was that they got to direct the second Star Wars movie, the one that came out now. But when he had Luke Skywalker throw his lightsaber like that over his shoulder, throwing it away, what he was really doing is saying to fans of the entire Star Wars franchise, like, we don't care how invested you've been in this character and how much you have seen this character as the central good guy hero for the past however long you've been watching it. We're now going to subvert your expectations in a way that makes no sense. There have been no signs of this. Nothing.
So let's contrast two characters in that. So Luke Skywalker is this hero. He does this great stuff. He falls a little bit because, you know, it's a shitty kind of world for Jedis and all this other stuff, and the evil get really powerful and all this stuff. And then he becomes a whiny little brat and quits. Yeah. Let's go to Boromir, which you brought up in the last podcast. Sure. Boromir is a hero and honorable and everything, and he falls to darkness, and he actually tries to steal the ring from Frodo, not to destroy it, but to use it for his own power and gain. Then realizes his mistake, is shocked that he allowed that it even happened, and literally sacrifices his life to save the person that he was trying to kill for the ring. He goes out in this beautifully honorable, amazing way that redeems, and you know that it really wasn't even him that fell. It was the magic and the temptation and the, you know, all the evil that was in the One Ring.
And that was the last act of the first book. Or that was in the last act of the first book. Well, it was certainly the end of the movie. And that was why that movie had an ending. It told the narrative story of the Fellowship of the Ring. And then it ended. The saga
the
had
Fellowship
not
broke
ended.
up.
But the fellowship was done. Yeah. Yep. And then the Two Towers told the story of Saruman and the Dark Tower, and it told the story of the Horse Lords, and all of that was that story. And the saga wasn't over.
You do got to give Lord of the Rings a little pass too, because it was never meant to be a trilogy. 100%. He wrote it as one book. They just physically didn't have the technology to print it.
But it was,
so they had to chop it up.
There were still narrative chunks in it that could be told as stories. And especially in the movies, this is very clear to you, right? And in the last movie, it is then the climactic finale, and it leads into it. It is, and if a saga on the scale of Lord of the Rings can do that, if you can, in Lord of the Rings, extract the stories that make up the saga and have them be complete stories that nonetheless hook me through to the next one, but don't leave me feeling unfulfilled. If Lord of the Rings could do that on its epic scale, then I promise you could do it on yours. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it really is about pushing yourself. You know, I said this in the last one. It's about earning your paycheck. It's about figuring it out. Like Stranger Things, I wanted to go there. Stranger Things is fantastic. I'm a huge fan of Stranger Things, and they're exactly opposite of what you're talking about. So what you were talking about is, sure, they resolved. I'm trying to remember exactly how you put it. It didn't fit with the rest of the movie. It didn't have the same feel as the rest of the movie. So, like, you know, Wonder Woman ends with the God fight, but it doesn't feel like it's even the same movie. Stranger Things does the exact opposite. Every season of Stranger Things ends in a way that absolutely feels like it absolutely ties, you know, it feels like it goes really well with the rest of the story, so that it doesn't change in the tone of what they're doing. And I don't know if this is the limitation, because we have to do it in one episode of, you know, a 13 episode story. So we've got 12 episodes to set up the climax, only one episode to do the payoff. That may be, because I've thought about this a lot, and that may be because they have the limitation of the medium. That may be why every season ends in this really weak way. It happens almost instantaneous. It takes like 5 minutes to wrap up the entire season, and it just doesn't leave you as fulfilled as I feel it should.
Your build-up is amazing, and your payoff just is
quick.
Nothing.
Yeah. Well, no, they definitely do something. But it's
not enough.
In every season, you just feel like, man, I thought this was going to be a bit more explosive ending than this. Yeah. And it was just like, and then we close the hole, and we're saved. And then we, you know, send them back, you know, do this thing, and we're saved. It's just this one little, 11 just does this thing. And then that's it. Yeah. Every season just kind of ends in this really quick thing that the buildup was so long.
It builds you. And then instead of having a payoff, you have a payoff.
Yeah. And I think I really do. I don't think it's their fault. I don't think this is bad writing. I think it's okay, well, we can only wrap it up. And so I've thought about that, as a TV writer, could I use 2 or 3 episodes to do the climax? Could I use 6 episodes, 7 episodes to build up to it, and then do the third act climax over multiple? And that would be a little harder, because now we're going back to what we were talking about, that you had a problem with that one writer, where you would now be ending every episode as a cliffhanger, not as a complete story.
But if you do a cliffhanger once a season, that's okay. Like, I can take a cliffhanger once a season or once a book. My problem is when everything is a cliffhanger. Right.
So it can be done, and we know it can be done. There's tons of movies that have great endings. To kind of bring it around and bring us to a conclusion of this episode, it really comes back, and I've said this a couple of times, it really comes down to earning your paychecks. Don't take the easy answer. If you come up with an ending and it's the first ending you come up with, it's probably the weakest. If you just push yourself and you just think about it. And that's why it really makes me mad with these big budget movies. I mean, these guys, they have 80 million, 100 million, 150 million, $200 million budgets, and they're cranking out garbage. Don't mess up your endings. You just spend some time on it.
Keep your ending in keeping with what has gone before, and make sure that you actually offer a satisfying conclusion. Don't continually try to go for the cheap trick.
Don't take the cheap, easy way outs. Especially on endings.
Especially on endings. Do not.
Otherwise, you're going to make a $200 million movie, and then me and Marie are going to just talk
be
bad
like
about
you
it.
Suck.
Just endings are hard. They are, and they should be hard. Because the harder you work at them, the more dynamic you can make them. And don't be afraid of abandoning ideas. Like, oh my God, this is a great idea. And then somebody's like, it actually, it isn't. It's kind of weak. Oh, okay. Yeah, I see your point. Abandon it. Come up with something else. It's fine.
And on that note, we will see you next week. Hi guys, this is Marie from Releasing Your Inner Dragon, and I hope you're enjoying the podcast. If you're interested in more content on fantasy world building, head over to YouTube and look up Just in Time Worlds. I release tons of content there. If you'd like to check out my book, The Hidden Blade by Marie M. Mullaney, it is available as an ebook, audiobook, and print book on Amazon. Thanks for listening, and see you soon.
Hey guys, Drake here. Thank you so much for listening to Releasing Your Inner Dragon podcast. I hope you're getting a ton of information and maybe even some nuggets of gold that you can take into your own writing to help you on your journey of story creation. A couple things I want to throw at you. First of all, for the first time in years, I am opening myself up to being a private mentor again. If you would like for me to work with you to improve your writing right now, reach out to me. You can either go to my website, maxwellalexanderdrake.com, and send me a contact form, or just email me at author@maxadrake.com. Also, as many of you may know, I've been out of the novel game for quite a few years. I was the lead fiction writer for EverQuest Next from Sony. I've been in the movie and TV industry for a few years now, but I am excited to say I'm back into the novel game. I've actually been working on a novel for a little while now, and I'm going to start dropping it on Amazon's Vella. So if you're on that platform, look me up, Maxwell Alexander Drake. Thank you again for listening, and as always, keep writing.